What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the stream today. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving. Got the day off today, so just wanted to jump on for a bit, talk about some of my final trade deadline thoughts that aren't going to make it into a video, answer some questions, and just generally have a good time. So I have a couple of things that I want to get through here that I'm going to kind of power through, just some talking points, some players that I didn't mention in previous videos, but then I will be taking questions. So if I don't answer a question right away, just stick around, maybe ask it again if I don't get to it, but want to try to get to as many as I can. One question I did want to ask here, maybe I'll ask it again when there's more people, but because trades in a lot of dynasty leagues, I say probably 75% of dynasty leagues are going to be wrapped up by the time we get to the fantasy playoffs. I'm curious what kind of content you'd like to see for the rest of the season. You know, what kind of dynasty content would be interesting to you? What do you think would be helpful to you? I have some ideas, but this is my first, my first season on YouTube doing this. So I'm open to ideas, pretty much down to make videos about anything and everything dynasty related. So feel free to drop your suggestions. In the meantime, I want to talk through a little bit of a last minute rebuild that I'm doing, show a couple trades that I made, talk through the thought process behind them as we let people kind of shuffle in here. So basically I had a league where I thought I was making the playoffs this year. I had Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Chris Olave, Devontae Adams, Mark Andrews. I had a pretty good team. I thought it was good on paper. Either way, wasn't winning the games that I needed to win. And so through bad matchup luck, some dud weeks in inopportune times, I was pretty unlikely to make the playoffs heading into last week. I'm still not like technically mathematically eliminated, but I have been struggling here. So I decided to go ahead and ship off some pieces, make some trades that I think are value wins for me, and just sort of gear up for next year. And John Atlas, I was banging the drum for Ladd and Drake May. Appreciate the shout out. I'm glad that those things are panning out so far. It's definitely feeling good at the moment. I see we've got fantasy points in the chat. What's up? I bet that's Tom. Never fear Sean Tucker. No, we're not fearing Sean Tucker. I think he's referring to the Bucky Irving thumbnail. He's going to come up in a little bit as well. So thank you. Hey, thanks for the shout out. Yeah, we love the likes, comments, all that stuff is great. I mean, get in the chat. Let me know what you're thinking today. All right. So I'm going to get back to some of these questions. But anyway, the trade that I wanted to talk about here, first trade I want to talk about here, it was a pretty big one. Oh, that's not the one I wanted. Go back. No spoilers here. All right. So why does this thing keep moving? 1 second. I think it's set to automatically switch between. There we go. All right, so this trade was a pretty big one. Like I said, I had Kyler Murray, other pieces on my team. I had Jahmyr Gibbs, Terry McLaurin, Juwan Jennings. So I went ahead and traded all of those players. And in return, I got Dak Prescott. One of the guys I mentioned in this recent video is being, I think, pretty undervalued by the market right now. Chris Godwin also out for the season. Devon Achane, Garrett Wilson, a second and a third. And so in this trade, obviously what I'm doing here is capitalizing on the Dak Prescott and the Chris Godwin injury. This other team is a contender, a bye week team. Actually, I don't really think they even needed more pieces, but either way, some people want to try to strengthen their rosters heading into the playoffs, explore every possible edge. For what it's worth, he has a ton of roster value anyway, so it's not hurting him. But the way I see this trade is like Kyler is not a guy that you need to move as a rebuilder. You can carry Kyler Murray from one season to the next for sure. He's a high-end quarterback, but he was a logical fit for this trade because the other manager was starting Russell Wilson as his QB2. QB3 situation was pretty shaky. And so I thought offering Kyler for Dak as kind of the basis for this trade, I thought that was the best way that I could entice him to give me some extra value. And so sometimes you have to include pieces that you're not initially maybe intending to trade. But I threw Kyler into this deal. I was like, how do we make this work where I'm getting something, you're getting something that you want? And we had a couple counters back and forth. This is where we landed. And so he gets some obvious upgrades in McLaurin, who's having a good season. He viewed Gibbs ahead of Achane. For me, that's a wash, basically. Maybe a slight nod to Gibbs, but it's a very negligible difference to me. And so I was happy to make that swap if it gets the deal done. And then the biggest point of value here would be Garrett Wilson, the second and the third coming back my way. And so that is kind of resetting the clock a little bit on my team, adding a wide receiver that I think very highly of in Wilson, adding some draft capital. So I think this is, for a team that's not in the playoffs, I think this trade is a clear win. When you think of where Dak is going to be ranked and valued when he's coming back in week 1 of next season, where Garrett Wilson's going to be valued relative to the other pieces in this deal, McLaurin is about 6 months older than Chris Godwin. He's scoring about the same as Godwin was before he got hurt. I think that's close enough to a wash when you get, 8-9 months out from the injury. So I'm curious what you guys think of the deal. I think this one is a pretty solid win. And then we go to the second trade here. And again, not a player that I'm necessarily going out of my way to move, Jalen Hurts, but the other manager expressed interest, another playoff team looking to bolster his odds heading into the playoffs. It's only a start 9 league, so your quarterbacks in Superflex, they're going to be your biggest differentiators in terms of scoring. Hurts, obviously one of the bigger advantages at the position right now. He wanted to know, how do I get Jalen Hurts on my team? And, when you're talking about one of the top assets in Dynasty, especially in a start 9 format, it has to be a pretty big price. But for me to be able to grab Jordan Love, who's another one of those kind of locked in Dynasty QB1s, add another first round pick on top, add an interesting flyer in Cedric Tillman, who I think is worth about a second, that was enough value to push it over the top. And so through these 2 trades, I have kind of downgraded, but not dramatically downgraded, my 2 quarterbacks. I've picked up a first, a second, a third. I've added Tillman. I've added Garrett Wilson. And so I think doing that is going to not really impact my ability to compete again next season, but really reset the clock on my roster, bring my buying power up, keep it up for multiple years. So that was my thought process for any teams that have been eliminated from the playoffs that are still able to make trades. Maybe the rationale behind those deals, give you some thoughts on how to send other offers. How do you value Joe Mixon at the moment for a rebuild? I would say about an early second. I don't feel the need to trade him away, I think, for anything less than that, because he is going to be back next year in Houston. But I think an early second, talking 201, 202, 203, that's the type of asset where you're going to be getting a good player there, and you're protected from any kind of an injury that could happen in the last 5 weeks. You're protected from anything that could happen to the Texans in the offseason, that could happen to Joe Mixon. So I think that type of flexibility and protection would be worth it for an early second. Not a lot of contenders actually have an early second, so maybe a pair of seconds or a player, a younger running back, somebody like Bucky Irving for sure, who we'll talk about in a little bit. So that's about where I would value him. Again, not a must-sell player, but just one of those guys where I think you're better served getting that peak value now if you're not going to make the playoffs than waiting, hoping he can maintain the same level of value into the offseason. But the tricky thing about that advice is I don't want someone to go to their league where maybe nobody's willing to pay for Joe Mixon and think I have to trade him at all costs. Like sometimes if your league is stubborn or they think the same way that you do, you end up just being better off holding a player. And so that's possible as well. So let's talk about three quick contending targets. Three guys that I like for playoff teams. If you could still make trades, just to see if you want to look into these guys. And you don't have to make a trade. I want to say that right off the top. You don't have to go out and make trades just because you're going into the playoffs and the trade deadline is coming. If you have a team that's ready to roll into the playoffs, you already have kind of reasonable projections at all positions. You don't have to go out and burn more value trying to up that projection by 3 points or 4 points or 5 points. But if you're dealing with an injury or you've been dealing with a weak spot all year, you can go out and consider making a trade. One guy I would look at is Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton, over the past 5 games, leads all wide receivers in yards, which is kind of wild. He's got a 31% targets per out run, 2.99 yards per out run. He has a 32.1% first read target share. He's just been kind of unreal for the last 5 weeks. Better than probably the best stretch of his career, even better than that breakout season that he had so long ago. And Sutton actually has the 4th best remaining schedule for wide receivers. He plays the Browns, the Colts, the Jaguars, and the Bengals. Those are all plus matchups for wide receivers. The Colts, Jags, and Bengals games at least should be, they project to be decently high scoring. So, and the Browns too. I mean, they throw at a high rate. These could all be high scoring games. It can be hard because the Broncos have such a good defense. And so with somebody like a Jameis Winston, it's possible they could bottle him up. But yeah, those Sutton trades, I mean, those Sutton games are going to be favorable for him. Bo Nix is playing very well, at least within the context of what the Broncos are asking him to do. They have far and away the best graded pass protection line, which is great for Sutton because he can work those intermediate areas. And so we've seen that over the last 5 games. And I think he's probably not going to be like a top 5 wide receiver the rest of the year, but he should be probably a high end wide receiver too, at worst a mid wide receiver too. He has that kind of low end wide receiver 1 upside at the very least with how the position's been this year. So I think he is a very strong target. And another good reason to go after him is he's not that hard to get from a non-playoff team. I feel like there aren't that many non-playoff teams that are going to be clinging so tightly to Courtland Sutton. He just doesn't really have that name brand value. Whereas if you try to go get somebody like Tyreek Hill or Cooper Kupp, the manager is going to want to make you pay because they have this sort of idea in their head of what Cooper Kupp or Tyreek Hill are. And I don't think that exists with Sutton. I think he's kind of Jacoby Myers-esque in that way, where he just doesn't really get respect. And to be fair, he hasn't deserved it. I mean, he hasn't been very relevant in 3-4 years now. His ADP this offseason on Underdog was in like the 90s. So anyway, he's a good target in my mind. I think what I would offer for him to a non-playoff team is just a future second. I would not pay more than a second, but if you still have your 2025 second and that's going to be a late pick, I would definitely offer that. Maybe your second and your third, or maybe just your 2026 second. I think any of those offers is reasonable. I think if the other manager is holding out for more than that, I'd probably just look elsewhere because he is still older. I don't have it offhand. He's either 28 or 29. He's probably turning 29 this offseason if he isn't already. And it's really not worth sending more than that. But that's about where I'd have it. Matthew, I apologize for the advice coming too late. I know for some people those deadlines have passed. It's tricky to time the advice, for every league. Because you typically want to get those trades in, as close to the deadline as possible. And it was sort of hard to figure out who was actually going to be those main pieces for the stretch run. But I feel you. If you've got trades you'd love to make and the deadline's passed, that sucks. I prefer my deadlines to be right before the playoffs. So week 14 is kind of my ideal. You can trade right up until the playoffs, but playoff teams can't make trades. I think that's ideal. But I know a lot of people have them this week. I know some people had them last week. So it is how it is. Couple quick questions I'll hit here before I get to my next target. does it make sense to offer my running backs, Henry or Mixon, for the number 1 pick next year for possibly Janty? I mean, yeah, absolutely. I don't know any other context about your team. I don't really need any context about your team. If you could get the 101 pick for either of those 2 running backs, or even for both of them together, I would absolutely take that. I had no hesitation at all. Janty is going to be, if that's how you say his name, is going to be extremely valuable, or whoever you're getting with that number 1 pick is going to be extremely valuable. Probably one of the top 16 or so assets in Dynasty before they touch the field. So that's a no-brainer for me to send 2 running backs that, yeah, they're productive right now. They're also well past their prime age. They are on the verge of decline, both on the field and in Dynasty. So that's easy for sure. Is Pittman a buy? Wendell, for one thing, I would say it just depends on what he costs. He's probably pretty gettable in a lot of leagues. I don't personally view him as a buy, and the reason for that is I think that Josh Downs is better than him, and I struggle to see Anthony Richardson really consistently supporting these 2 wide receiver options. And with him already being, what is he, 27 now, or 26 and a half or whatever, I don't really see like a lot of relevance for him in the short term. He's not a talented enough player for me to want to hold out for a better situation later. I think he's worth like a mid-second, maybe a mid to late second, and I'm not going out of my way to acquire him. Yes, I would definitely trade a late first and a mid-second for Brian Thomas in a rebuild. No questions asked. I would do that. All right. I want to get to my next contending trade target here, which is a tight end. He just played last night, unfortunately. So you won't be able to use his score this week, but if you can get him for the future, Jonnu Smith is looking like a very good tight end. I don't have to break that news to anybody. He's been doing it for a little while now, but he didn't make it into the video that I did. So I want to shout out Jonnu Smith. He is the tight end 5 in points per game from weeks 5 to 12. That's going to be even higher after this week comes in. 15.5 points per game in non-tight end premium is really, really good. That's a valuable player. He is 6th at the position in first read target share during that span. He's been super efficient, 2.86 yards per out run. That's crazy good for a wide receiver, let alone a tight end. And he's averaging about 7 targets per game. So he's been a very dangerous yards after catch threat. And that's how he's been able to turn those 7 targets a game into 15.5 points per game. But the headline here is that he has been basically identical to Tyreek Hill. I saw a tweet from David Gautieri. If you pull up Jonnu Smith and Tyreek Hill's stat lines this year, they are basically identical. It's like within a couple of catches of each other, within like 10 receiving yards. They both have 4 touchdowns. So he's basically just Tyreek Hill as a tight end. No, I mean, they're not playing the same roles, but it seems like this offense has shifted. Well, the offense has definitely shifted to more of a short passing game. And I don't know if it's born out of, if this is how they want to run the offense. I tend to think it's not. They just gave Jalen Waddle a huge bag of money. I'm sure they want more out of Hill. I don't know if it's about his injury or something. But either way, this offense has shifted where Achane and Jonnu Smith are soaking up a ton of targets. Tua goes to him constantly whenever the offense is playing like 2-minute drill or what, they're hurrying up for whatever reason. And so he's just become this PPR scam, very much like Evan Ingram last year down the stretch, who was incredible for fantasy. I think that this streak is going to continue at least throughout the year. I don't see anything from the Dolphins that suggests they are going to go a different way or that they're capable of doing things a different way. And so very much like Sutton, I think he's a guy that if he happens to be on a non-playoff team, he's going to be very obtainable. I'd be surprised if a lot of non-playoff teams are turning down the 2025 second for Jonnu Smith. If people have that much conviction in him that they want to hold on to him, then I guess that's fine for them. In their position, I'd probably sell for the second. But I think in a lot of cases that would get done. And so I want to show you here. I pulled up the trade database on Fantasy Calc, and you can see, recent trades these are all from today. Jonnu Smith for a 2025 second, Jonnu Smith and a first for Garrett Wilson. I don't really like that, depending on where the first is. Jonnu Smith for Romeo Dobbs. That's so easy. Jonnu Smith and a second for Tracy. I'd probably take Tracy, but, that's not insane. Jonnu Smith for Dalton Schultz and Deontay Johnson. I did cite Johnson as a decent buy for rebuilding teams, but I don't think that this is a ridiculous price to pay if you're in a pinch. Jonnu, Drew Lock, and a fourth for a 2027 second. Joe Fest, hey, I'm happy to hear you join the Discord. That's awesome. Welcome. It's an awesome community in there. And the best part is you never miss any of the videos or the live streams. Here we have Jonnu for a third. I mean, that's just silly. Jonnu for McMillan and Whittington. Jonnu for a second. Here we have Jonnu for a fourth and a third. Jonnu for a third. There are tons of trades here where you can get Jonnu Smith for pennies on the dollar, and when you think about other tight ends and how much it cost to invest in like a Sam Laporta, a Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid, if you've just been kind of rolling with one of those tight ends, or even better, you've been rolling with like a Hunter Henry type all season, you have an advantage over the rest of your league in that you haven't sunk a bunch of this buying power into the tight end position, and now you can potentially go and get this big upgrade for very cheap. And these are the types of buys that I like to make. I don't want to go and make the big splash trade for George Kittle. You can do it in certain situations. It definitely makes sense. But when you can go and add a player like this on the cheap at the last moment when you know you need them, that can sometimes end up being the most effective win now purchase. And just while I have this tab up here, I do have the Courtland Sutton trades as well. I forgot to show those off. Sutton, here we have Sutton for a 25 second. Here we have Sutton and Hubbard for Fant and a first. Probably not what I would spend a first on, even though the value is not terrible on paper, but don't love that. Sutton and a third for a 2026 second. Sutton for a 2025 second. Sutton for Adonai Mitchell. Sutton for a second and a third. Sutton and Judy for a second. So this is what I'm talking about here, right? There are tons of trades just within the last 2 days where Sutton is being shipped off for a second or less. And so if you are starting a guy in your flex that is a real liability, maybe you've been starting, I don't know, Elijah Moore or something, that's a pretty reasonable price to pay for what a guy can actually score for you. Traded Jonnu away for absolute peanuts in a 2 PPR for tight end league. Look, he wasn't doing that much early on. Like, it was easy to make that mistake. I don't think anybody could have foreseen what he would be doing at this point. But he is a great athlete. The offense is potent when it is working properly. So that's what he has working for him here. What should you be doing with Laporta in a rebuild? I mean, I don't think anybody that's competing really wants to pay for him. So he's a young player. I'd probably just hold and hope that things get better in the future. If you can cash out for a decent first and re-roll, I think that's fine too. As a rebuild, which quarterback should I sell? Kyler, May, Nix, Purdy. Looking to compete next year. I have Marv, so hesitant to sell Kyler. I don't think you need to worry too much about stacks in regular managed leagues. I don't think that's too big of a deal. I mean, Nix is the one that I would sell personally. I think that he's the one who has the most opportunity to not fall in value. I don't think he's at risk. Like I think he's very clearly an established quarterback, and as long as he's starting, he's going to have that value as a scrambler as well. So I don't think he's risky per se, but I do think his value is potentially inflated and it could settle down a little bit. And I don't think that he really has I don't think it's a likely outcome that he jumps up into like the top 24 overall dynasty assets. Whereas I think Purdy's already kind of valued on that fringe. May, I think, should already be valued there. Kyler is valued there. I think Knicks can be turned into pretty interesting pieces at running back and wide receiver, potentially even get 2 firsts for him. And that's a lot of buying power that you can then reallocate into other positions. But honestly, I'd even look into downgrading one of those other 3 quarterbacks too. I don't think you need to have 3-star quarterbacks in Superflex. My ideal distribution, if I'm working with, if I have a super team, whatever, but if I'm working with like a normal amount of roster value, my preference would be 2-star quarterbacks and then a 3rd quarterback that's kind of cheaper, like a Geno type, Stafford, something like that. Sam Darnold was a nice one that you could get this year. That's how I like to do it, where I can then shift some of that value into other positions. Hey, I appreciate this. Sylvester, not a name you hear a lot. I appreciate that a lot. And thanks for shouting out the tweets as well. If you're not following me on Twitter, I somehow now have more Twitter or YouTube subscribers than Twitter followers. I haven't been able to pick up a lot of those recently, but my content over there is more for fun than it is for content. All right, let me get my last target out of the way here before I answer any more questions. My last target, the thumbnail gave it away. It's Bucky Irving. And the great thing about Bucky Irving is that he doesn't have to be, just a win now target. If you buy him on your contender, I think he can help you right now, but he can also help you in the long term. And that's why he's an awesome trade target. He's what I would consider a classic buy high candidate. And the reason for that is because a lot of times a great buy high candidate is one where people know that his value is higher now than it was before, but they maybe don't know how high it should be. And I think he should be ranked very highly. Based on what we saw last week, I think he needs to be shooting up rankings dramatically. And so I think some managers aren't going to quite understand what they have. They're maybe still going to see him as an undersized running back who was drafted in the 4th round in a committee. All those things are technically true, but I don't think it's going to matter for scoring fantasy points. So I really do like him as a buy high candidate. I'm not going to hide the facts here or hide the main point here. The Bucs have by far the best remaining running back schedule of any team. He gets to play Carolina in week 17, which is, I think, the best overall matchup for running backs, or one of the absolute best. They are allowing 41% more fantasy points per game to running backs than the average team. But basically their whole fantasy playoff run is really solid. We saw this past week, Bucky consolidated more of the routes than he ever has before. He had over a 50% snap share. And the guys at Dynasty Points were all over this past week. So if you didn't listen to their show, I would really recommend it. Definitely the best Dynasty podcast out there right now. But I want to throw the name out there as well. And I think that Rachaad White and Sean Tucker being on the Bucs is a good thing. It actually protects him from a future investment in running back because they do have White under contract next year. They have Sean Tucker under contract next year. I think the most likely outcome is that they stick with those 3 guys. And I think we've seen now that with those 3 guys, Bucky is clearly the best. He's clearly the most talented. They're realizing that. And just, 10 or 11 games into his career as a rookie, a day 3 rookie, he is already taking on a ton of work. So I have moved him up. He is my RB1 of this class, the 2024 class. I would absolutely move Jonathan Brooks for him. I would absolutely move Trey Benson for him. I would move Tyrone Tracy for him, although Tracy is right now my RB2 in the class. So that's where I have him valued. And so I think he's a great win now and win later type of target. And let's just take a look at the trades as well. See what people are giving up for Bucky Irving. And then we'll jump into more questions. Now, I'm going to say right now, there are some trades here that I'm not going to like. So I'm not saying he's a buy in all cases. Personally, I still don't really want to send a first round pick. He's right on that verge for me. He's like right on the edge of my late first valuation. And in some leagues, you're not going to get him without sending a first. So that's maybe you can send a first and get another piece back with him. So right off the bat here, 2 trades I don't love: Bucky for a first, Bucky for Jalen Waddle. But there are other deals that give me some hope that it's still possible to buy him at a reasonable cost. Down here we have Bucky for Xavier Worthy. Easy call for me. Bucky Irving for Gus Edwards in a second. Easy. Bucky Irving for Khalil Shakir. That's easy for me too. I definitely want Bucky there. I think Shakir is a good wide receiver, especially in a deeper format, but he has a cap ceiling. He's very much a PPR merchant. He's never going to be a wide receiver 1. Bucky has serious upside. I would take him there easily. Bucky and Darnell Mooney for Joe Mixon. I like the Irving side there. Bucky and Najee Harris for Rome Odunze. That one's on the verge for me. Bucky for Xavier Worthy again. Maybe that's the one you need to try if you still have Worthy. I would definitely add another piece to that, like a third. Bucky for Jamison Williams and Jalen Wright. I'm comfortable with that personally. So, it's not all hits here. He's not an easy player to buy, but I think he's a player who's worth kicking the tires on, seeing if a manager doesn't quite know what they have, and then potentially snagging him for less than he should be worth. Because I think he's probably a top 12 dynasty running back moving forward. Another guy that I would consider, I would see if you can maybe sell for Bucky Irving with a plus on top, would be Jonathan Taylor. I'm getting a little bit sick of the whole Jonathan Taylor routine. He doesn't catch passes. He's extremely reliant on high efficiency and touchdowns. Anthony Richardson seems to be threatening those touchdowns. I'm sure he's going to be better in the future than he's been recently, but I wouldn't mind selling him for Bucky Irving plus at this point if that's possible. Anyway, those are my targets. Let me know if you have questions about those players specifically. In the meantime, I'm going to try to catch up on a few of these in the chat. This is very much on point here. Najee in a late second for Bucky Irving? Yes, absolutely. Who do you think the most attainable wide receiver 1 is for a rebuilder? I mean, after last night, probably CeeDee Lamb. Potentially. It's going to depend on the team that this wide receiver is on, but I think CeeDee Lamb would be a good target in the sense that he has frustrated managers. His quarterback's out for the season. I think you could get in on him a little cheaper than he should be. Trade between non-contenders, 12-team Superflex PPR. Send Tracy plus the 104 or 105 for Rice plus Kincaid. Still got 3 firsts. That's a little rich for me because I do prefer Tracy over Kincaid. And I do think that the 104 or 105 in a Superflex is probably going to be a comparable player to Rice. So I don't know if that's enough of a value win on paper to give up the flexibility of having those picks later on when the draft gets closer. So I'd probably hold there. Jack, should we be worried about Garrett Wilson with Aaron Rodgers maybe leaving the Jets next season? I mean, have you seen Aaron Rodgers play football this year? I don't think you need to be worried about it. I mean, I think there are plenty of outcomes where Aaron Rodgers leaving the Jets is a good thing, honestly. I don't. Obviously, there are ways that it could be worse, but no, I mean, I'm not worried. I invest in talent first and foremost, and I think it's extremely unlikely that the Jets find themselves with a quarterback as bad as Zach Wilson again. I think that's what people miss about Garrett Wilson's first 2 years is they're saying, well, he can't play well with a bad quarterback. It's like, it wasn't a normal bad quarterback. He had far and away the worst quarterback play in the league, like just absolute basement level. And I don't think he's going to end up with the 32nd ranked quarterback in the league again. I think he'll be all right. Are you playing Pokemon TCG Pocket on mobile? Great way to catch them all. I haven't been super busy. If you must know, when I have a little bit of time, I've been playing old school RuneScape. So it's a little bit of a throwback to my middle school years, but I was feeling nostalgic. So that's what I've been doing. Brees and Garrett Wilson feel like big buys off Keep Trade Cut. What do you think? I don't know. I mean, I don't know where they're at on Keep Trade Cut off the top of my head. Brees Hall is, I wouldn't say he worries me, but I do think Braylon Allen is good. I do think they're going to have a new coach next year. And so there is a little bit of a leap of faith with Brees Hall where you have to trust that whoever they bring in to be the coach is going to still want to use him as kind of the every down guy. I'm not downgrading him per se, but I wouldn't be buying Brees Hall if I'm not using him right now. I don't think. It would have to be a really big value win. As far as Garrett Wilson, I feel like he's always undervalued. He's like the wide receiver 7 on the year or something like that. People still don't really trust him. They don't believe in him. I don't get why. I think he's incredibly talented. I think he's still has potential to be a top 5 wide receiver in a season. So you never have to convince me to buy Garrett Wilson. What might you want to add to Brian Robinson for Bucky? I mean, I'd love to add nothing, but what would I add? I'd add a late second, couple thirds, maybe something like that. Brian Thomas Jr. for Bucky and a mid to late first, one quarterback, half PPR. In one quarterback, I'm still going to take Brian Thomas there, unless that's like a top 5 pick, because any kind of a playoff first in one quarterback, you're getting into some really shaky profiles when you don't have the quarterbacks to kind of push good wide receivers down. As a rebuilder with how poorly New York Giants front office and coaching staff are, should we be worried going forward for Tracy? I don't know. I'm not that worried. I mean, running backs just, I guess the question is whether the offense is going to be completely incompetent. But I mean, Tracy scored 15 PPR points last night, splitting the backfield with Devin Singletary, with Drew Lock throwing for like 110 yards. So I just don't know how situation dependent he really is. And at his current value, I don't think he's that risky to invest in. Love and peace. I don't really do start sits. Should you start London or Bucky? I don't know. Probably whoever's projected higher by the site where you play fantasy football. If you don't like the projections, you could try flipping a coin, something like that. You could pull a name out of a hat. I don't really know. I'm not sure what their matchups look like this week. I think Bucky plays the Panthers, right? I mean, that's definitely a good spot. I'm kind of confused as to how your team is good enough to bench one of these two players. So maybe just count yourself lucky there. I'm going to answer this question, but real quick while I have you guys here. I did ask at the top of the show, there weren't as many people viewing. If you have any suggestions or requests for what type of content I should cover the rest of this season, since I can't really do a lot of trade advice, most leagues are going to be locked up in the next week or two as far as trades. So if there's anything you'd like to hear about, anything you'd like to see for Dynasty content that you think would be actionable or helpful right now, I'd love to hear about it. And you don't have to say 2025 prospect analysis. I'm sure that is something you'd like. I'll see how much I can get into prospects before the season ends. But outside of rookie prospect stuff, let me know if you have any ideas. All right. So the question here, our trade deadline is finished. I wanted to know how you do off-season trading. I have no picks or this year or next year, me joining the league and wanting to make my own team. Okay. I'm not quite sure I understand the situation there with your picks. Like you joined the league and just immediately traded all the picks to get the players you wanted. That's unfortunate. Was thinking Brian Robinson and Josh Downs for 106 and a 2026 second from a guy. Yeah, I mean, I think that is a good trade. I probably would take the picks there, especially if you are about to rebuild. I would say it's a little bit too vague for me to give too much specific information. I'm not quite sure what phase your team is in. Like if you're, do you think you can be competitive next year versus do you need a year to kind of retool this team because you've lost a lot of value? That's going to impact the types of trades that you'd want to make. I will say that one of the things I want to do early in the offseason, probably right after the year is over, is a multiple part series on how to rebuild your team. So, assuming you're coming out of a tank year, whether it was intentional or unintentional, how do you then transition from that tanking year and put yourself in a spot to be competitive the following season? And so now is probably as good a time as any to say, if you're interested in that and you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and hit the button, please. That would be helpful to me, and it could be helpful to you as well. What are some of the first moves that come to mind moving away Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts in a Superflex PPR full tight end premium? The first move that comes to mind would be keeping them. I would say they're guys you don't really want to move unless you are put in a position where you basically have to because you just don't have enough value on your team. Or you can make a pivot to a similarly useful asset and get a plus on top. So like I made a trade to go from Hurts to Jordan Love, add a first, add Cedric Tillman. I don't have a massive gap between Hurts and Love. So that was a reasonable deal for me. But I would not have wanted to trade Hurts and get back a quarterback like Dak Prescott or, I don't know, Sam Darnold or whatever. Those guys are big advantages in the Superflex. And so unless your team is solidly in the bottom half of the overall buying power of the league, which you can go and check on a site like Keep Trade Cut Power Rankings, you can go to dynastydaddy.com. If your team is not in that bottom half, I wouldn't really be entertaining offers. Myers or Debo PPR. If you're talking about who to start, I'd probably say Myers. If you're talking about who do you want in Dynasty, it's honestly closer than I would have ever thought, but I'd probably still go Debo. Aiden asks, would you send a 27 late first for Joe Burrow in a one quarterback league competing now with Darnold, Stafford, and Caleb Williams? No, I wouldn't trade a first for Burrow in that format. I think Caleb has the upside to carry the rest of the way. I don't think that a couple of points per game difference is really worth sending your first when you already have so much value at the quarterback position. I just think it's really hard to get those types of returns for one quarterback. If this is like a 14 or a 16 team league, maybe, but in a 12 team, one quarterback league, the position is just so replaceable that I don't think I would do that. What are your thoughts with Brandon Ayuk? I'm kind of worried about the injury and how he'll recover. Well, first of all, I would say if you didn't watch this week's video, go check it out. I dropped it yesterday morning, which I'm realizing in hindsight was not very smart because everybody was watching football already and hanging out with their families. So the video isn't doing quite as hot as usual. But if you haven't seen yesterday's video, I do think it's really good. I think it's helpful stuff for any non-playoff team. And it touches on Brandon Ayuk as a player that I think is a buy, even though I am worried about the injury. So I am worried about how he's going to produce next year. I think it's possible he doesn't get back to his regular form at all in 2025. But I also think that with the way the market works, you will be able to sell him for more than he's worth now before the season even begins. So if you have a league that's pretty active where you feel like you can get multiple trades done, I think he's worth buying. If you already have him, I wouldn't be trying to trade him now. I would wait till the offseason when everybody says Brandon Ayuk is ahead of schedule, he's in the best shape of his life, or whatever version of that they're throwing out there. William, I hear your idea here. Interested in key metrics for player evaluation. Yeah, I could possibly break down some metrics. I don't think that's, like you said, for the offseason, I'd probably do that. What I am curious about is how to fill the rest of this season, because I don't think there's going to be too much demand for that type of analysis until January is over. I think people are mostly focused on their own teams and how to win or whatever. But that is definitely a good idea for me to file away for the quiet times in January and February. Burrow for JT and Mooney and one quarterback. Yeah, I mean, I don't play in any one quarterback dynasty league, so it's possible that I am not in touch with the market. But to me, it seems like I would easily want Taylor over Burrow in a one quarterback. Just, you know, Burrow, he's been really good, but for the most part, he's going to be interchangeable in any given season with a lot of other pocket passers. Whereas Taylor does still have the upside to be, you know, one of those really impactful running backs. So I think I would go for Jonathan Taylor, and I would just play Baker the rest of the year. Should I trade Marvin Harrison for CJ? I guess CJ Stroud, Jonathan Taylor, and I don't know what the other name is. Yes. I mean, definitely. I guess I would have to assume this is one quarterback because there's no way somebody's trading you all of those players for Marvin Harrison in Superflex. But if it is Superflex, then I would definitely take the package. As a rebuilder, would you trade away Mooney and Ramondre? If so, who for? Yeah. I mean, I would make them available. For Mooney, I would take any second round pick personally. For Ramondre, I would want that first, or that, did I say first? I meant to say second if I said first. Any second for Mooney. For Ramondre, I'd want like a early to mid second. You probably won't get an early second, but maybe a 204, 205 type of pick, or get a regular playoff second with like another future second or another running back, or you could try to pivot to a younger running back, get like a Trey Benson plus, something like that. They're not must trade players. They're both like 26, 27. They'll be back next year, probably be useful. But again, they're not guys that I think are building blocks, so I'd rather just move off of them. What do you make of the Bengals backfield situation? Do you think Chase Brown is the guy and is safe for us to hold on to? You say another channel is not convinced he's the guy. Well, if you listen to Dynasty Points, they certainly think so. As far as is it safe for us to hold on to him, I think it's just like that's just an impossible question. We just don't know what NFL teams are going to do with these players. So I have no idea. I can't comment on whether he's safe. I think if we knew that he was, let's put it this way. If we knew for a fact that Chase Brown was going to continue in this role in future seasons, he would be a top 5 running back in Dynasty. And the market is not valuing him anywhere close to that. So I don't think that you have to believe that he's safe to buy into him at his current price. I think you can reasonably pay a late first if you really need running back help. And then you just cross your fingers and you hope that he doesn't get replaced in the offseason. My take is that he probably isn't getting replaced, but that the Bengals will probably invest maybe a day 3 pick, bring in a name in free agency to add to the backfield, and probably not give Chase Brown 95% of the touches every game next year. And he'll probably still be useful as like an RB2, but he won't be this crazy top 5 scoring running back. So that's my take. If you're comfortable with that outcome, I would say you have the green light to pay whatever his cost of entry is in your league. Is Goff a sell high after this season? Goff is one of the biggest sells in Dynasty. I really don't understand this guy's value. He's not doing anything this year that he didn't do last year and the year before, and yet his value just seems to creep higher and higher and higher. I know his completion percentage is really high. Like if you're in a completion percentage league where you get a bonus for that, I guess that's cool. He's scoring like 18 points per game, a little less than 18 the last time I checked, in your standard like 4-point passing touchdown leagues. I don't really get it. Like I said it in the video this week, I don't understand why he's 40 spots ahead of Dak. I guess that he's healthy right now and Dak isn't, but I'm not paying 40 spots of difference for the last whatever 6 games of the season. That's insane to me. So I have always thought Goff was a sell. I think whenever you have one of these quarterbacks that just clearly doesn't have any type of an elite scoring ceiling, and you're just paying for this idea of longevity that he's going to be around for a long time, I always think that those quarterbacks are sells. So yes, to me, Goff is a sell. I would be adding to Goff to get up to an elite quarterback like a Jordan Love, like a Joe Burrow, if I can, Justin Herbert, or I would be downgrading and trying to get multiple picks or get a cheaper quarterback plus, something like that. Guys, we're going to wrap this one up here in a minute. I will try to answer a couple more questions, but I just want to say I appreciate you guys tuning in, watching the video with me, or watching the video today. Hopefully some of the stuff I've talked about will help you guys as you get into the fantasy playoffs. Whatever the video is about next week, there will be a video. I just have to figure out what it's going to be, but we're going to keep that going. There will be a video every week. There will be live streams when I can do live streams. And I did add to the overlay here, become a member for exclusive perks. If you're interested in becoming a member, you can click the link in the description, or you can click the join button on my channel page or under the video if you're on a desktop, and it'll show you what the benefits are. But basically, you get access to my top 200 Dynasty rankings. You get access to a members chat where you can ask me questions very much like the ones I've been answering today. And you can, any of the members will tell you I'm always in there. I'm always answering questions. Very active with that. I like to help the members out because they help me out. And finally, I do a live stream like this one every week, or just about every week. And basically, it's just like this, just talking Dynasty, talking fantasy, sometimes best ball for an hour or so. And again, answering questions. So if you want to take your game to the next level, if you feel like you could use more one-on-one advice, it's not that expensive, helps me keep this channel going. So that's my pitch if you want to check it out. A couple more questions sitting in here. One from Allron. Who would you start between Pacheco, Pickens, and Bucky Irving? Again, with the start sits, man. Probably Bucky Irving. I don't think I want to play Pacheco if I don't have to. I think they'll probably ease him back in. The dude did break his leg, and they're playing the Raiders. And I'm just now realizing that the Chiefs game just started 8 minutes ago, so that question is probably outdated. I'm in a league with friends at the moment, but I want to join a second, more serious league. Oh, I've got an answer for you. Join the Pure Potential Discord, which is free. There are channels in there to find leagues. There are people in there that want to join more leagues. If you're talking about a redraft league, I probably would wait till the summer. But if you actually want to do a dynasty league, that is something you can start as soon as the season's over, January, February. You can absolutely do a startup draft that early. And I know for a fact that there are people in there that would love to do that with you. So go join the Discord. It's a great place to chat Dynasty anyway, get people's opinions. There's a start sit channel if that's your thing. So that would be my recommendation. It looks like I made it to the end of the chat here, and I would love to go watch the Chiefs game. So we're gonna end this here. Appreciate you guys again for watching. Appreciate you for supporting the channel, and I will talk to everybody real soon.